We're back with our special justice investigation into the safety of the United States power grid. And joining me now is Eitan Edwards, who is the Executive Director for International Preparedness Network and the Urban Survivalist. So what do you do? I mean, how do you prepare for something like Sandy or the power outage in 2003? But if there were to be something that would be nationwide, I mean, do we survive? How does the individual survive?
Well, the individual has to do the things beforehand. They have to take the necessary steps to protect themselves, because obviously, as you discussed in earlier parts of the program, that government isn't going to do the job. It's not functional in this way. There's so much debate about what needs to get done and what we should do. What the people have to recognize is they have to do for self at this point. And the only way to protect yourself from a catastrophe of this magnitude is to take the precautionary measures that you need to do before it happens, so that you know when it does.
So what do I do? I mean, look, we live in a society where everything is fast food, immediate gratification. You pull into a drive-through and you get lunch and you're happy.
Right.
How do I survive if I have no food?
Well, okay. Well, you do it like you have a threat assessment, which is to say, well, what's the problem? And then you develop what the solutions are to the problem, okay? So we have a blackout, a large-scale power outage, which would, of course, if it were produced by EMP, it would be a long-term catastrophe instead of a short-term.
So then how do I survive?
So you've got to take, well, what do you need? You need food, you need water. You can get them in camping goods stores, you can get them online. There are all kinds of specifically freeze-dried food, because dehydrated food just comes dehydrated food. Freeze-dried is already prepared. So all you really need is some water and a source of heat to heat it up. Now, if you don't want to do that, then you have canned goods, because the canned goods are non-perishable food items that you don't need to put in the refrigerator.
What is it going to take for Americans to realize, just the way in Lower Manhattan they realize on 9/11, that it can change in a minute?
Yeah, I think that sometimes people can be overwhelmed by the information itself, because there's so much. Like you mentioned earlier in the program about the Carrington event in 1859.
Right.
And if we had a Carrington event similar to that, people do not understand the magnitude of an emergency like that if it happened today. And they've got to recognize that if people thought Katrina was bad, we're talking about transformers being destroyed. The power transformers themselves, they can't be repaired. They have to be replaced.
Eitan, what would you say to people who think that preppers, or what we're talking about, is like a fringe movement?
Well, I mean, obviously that there are different degrees of prepping in that respect, but I can tell you this much. In times of trouble and in times of chaos, it's the preppers who are going to have food. It's the preppers who are going to have water. It's the preppers who are going to have first aid. It's the preppers who are going to have all of their medications. So it depends on what you want to look at it, but you know what they say. It's better to, to have and not need than to need and not have.
All right, Eitan Edwards, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. What you've just seen and heard is the very, very possible future if we do not do something to protect our grid. What's even more frightening is that this can be prevented. But as with most problems, greed, self-interest, and politicians who care more about their next election than the American people, and a lack of leadership in our capital, interfere with our safety. The shame is that the principal federal regulator that establishes standards for local power companies is also tasked with promoting the interest of the utilities. Now, how do you regulate and promote private companies at the same time? The legislation intended to protect us has been blocked in Washington again and again. There is one bill that can help us prevent this catastrophe and remedy our vulnerability. And make no mistake, it can be remedied. Politicians are blocking that bill. They're playing politics with our lives, and we cannot tolerate this. This is a nonpartisan issue, one of the most important in Washington today. And it's not going away. I'm not afraid to say that this scares the hell out of me, and it should scare the hell out of you, too. That's it for us tonight. Thanks for joining us on this special edition of Justice.